What is happening, everybody? This is Peter, your automotive fanatic, welcoming you to my channel. Hopefully you're having a fantastic day. We have in store another DIY today for you Porsche guys, and this may be applicable to some other vehicles as well. So what I have in store is we are going to change the brake pads as well as swap out rotors on my Porsche. Specifically for the front, we are actually going to upgrade from a 330 millimeter rotor to a 350 millimeter turbo rotor. So you Porsche guys are probably kind of wondering, why am I doing this? There's going to be a couple of reasons for the upgrade to a 350 millimeter rotor. For one, because you have a larger rotor, you're going to have better heat dissipation when you're braking. The other thing really revolves around physics. Now, I am definitely not a physicist, so I cannot tell you down to the pure science as to what the advantage is going to be, but it revolves around your lever torque strength. When you are trying to stop a spinning circle, you're going to have better level or lever power toward the outside. So a larger rotor is going to allow you to stop it better because you're pushing the caliper out a little further. The amount that it's going to stop in terms of force, again, I can't tell you, but that's what essentially we're going to do. We've got the 350 millimeter turbo rotor, and what I mean by turbo is it is coming from a 997.1 turbo chassis because they use the 350 millimeter rotor as opposed to the S's that use the 330. And for brake pads, I am going with Porterfield R4S pads. I used these when I had a big brake kit on my Audi S3 and I absolutely loved them. They had good initial bite, they did not dust as much as OEM, and they provided very sufficient and powerful braking force. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do today. Without further ado, my friends, let's go ahead and get started. But before we do that, I'm going to highlight basically what we're going to do. Now for the brakes on my car, it is essentially going to involve removing a cotter pin. It's going to be removing a retaining pin to the pads, and essentially the pads will actually come out from the very top. Very simplified process. To remove the rotors, what we actually need to do is we need to remove the calipers off the carrier, and that's just simply removing 2 bolts, and the caliper is essentially going to come off at that point so we can pull the rotors off. Now some of you, and I'm anticipating this on my vehicle, it's going to be a little tough to remove the rotors because these ones look like they're the OEM and they're essentially going to be stuck on, so it's going to take a little hammering from a mallet, but we should be able to do it. So without further ado, my friends, let's go ahead and get started on this caliper pad upgrade as well as the rotors. So here we have the driver's rear brake setup, and what we're going to first do is we are going to remove a little cotter pin here, and this is pretty easy to do. All you're going to do is just stick a flathead or something inside to pull the cotter pin out. There you go, there's your cotter pin. And then from there you're going to punch out the retaining bolt here. Please be careful as you're punching it through. Now I want to make a note here. This retaining pin is holding in this bracket that puts force down on your pads so that they can stay in. So as you're coming to the other side, you want to be careful that this doesn't essentially spring out and hit you or does some damage. So I'm going to go ahead and just slowly kind of do that there. And you guys saw how it kind of popped out. I did forget to mention, you want to go ahead and try to disconnect these sensor lines here. And put that away. And there is your retaining bolt. Now your pads essentially should come on out. And guys, the first thing you want to do is make sure that your handbrake is removed or disengaged. And I forgot, mine is engaged, so it is completely locked up at this point. So I'm going to disengage it. Alright guys, so I went ahead and fixed my rookie mistake by disengaging the brake, and from here I was able to essentially pull these out. What you may have to do is from the rotor side here, you might have to push it out a little bit because the piston has pushed it against the rotor. So go ahead and pull the pads out here, and you want to be very careful with this here is going to be your brake wear sensor, and it just essentially plugs right in here. Just be very careful if you want to reuse it. Otherwise, if you break this, you will have to purchase a new one, or the other option is keeping this and essentially closing the loop by tying them together. So we'll go ahead and remove these pads here, and then we'll take off the brake caliper to get to the rotor. So the next process to get to the rotor is we have to remove the caliper, and you need to do a few things prior to removing this. In the very back there is actually going to be a 10mm nut that you have to remove that allows the lines to actually disengage. So you want to go ahead and remove that there, and it's going to be right back here, guys. The next thing is you've got two 10mm Allens that you have to remove, and I took this one off. Once the second one is off, this caliper is going to be very loose, so you need to have some mechanism to hang it or to support it so that you don't put stress on the brake line itself. So let's go ahead and just remove this here. Okay, bolt is out, and from here you'll see that it is still held in by the little line in the back. I went ahead and removed it, and it is going to allow me to pull this off right here, and this is the connection I was talking about. So from here you can go ahead and safely set down your caliper on some type of stand. Make sure that everything is not binding, so that looks good. From here we're going to remove two Phillips screws right here, which should allow the rotor to come out. However, as I'd mentioned, I suspect that this one's going to be somewhat seized in, so I'm probably going to have to tap it with a mallet. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. As expected, guys, my rotor was somewhat seized, so a few taps of the mallet was able to disengage this, and I essentially just tapped it on the edge. That loosened it enough that I went ahead and grabbed it and just pulled it right out. So the rotor has now been removed. The next step that we have here is I went ahead and installed the rotor. What you do want to do is on the inside of the hub, I sanded it down real quickly to make sure that the rotor will have a nice surface to mate onto. So the rotor's on, I put the Phillips nuts back in and tightened them. There's no specific torque. No, I stand correct. I believe that Porsche says that these are roughly between 4 and 6 foot-pounds of torque on these here. And I went ahead and put the caliper on as well as the bolts. They are not tight yet, only hand tight. When you do torque them down, you want to torque down to 63 foot-pounds. And this device here is my caliper piston retractor. So I put it in so that I can push the calipers, or I'm sorry, the pistons back out to get the pads in. Now it is very crucial that when you're doing this, you need to open up your brake fluid reservoir, because fluid is going to rise if you don't have much pad life left. So make sure that you open it and monitor it so that it doesn't spill out. But I went ahead and already pushed these back. Now what we'll go ahead and do is we'll get the pads in. We'll connect the wear sensors. We'll go ahead and torque the bolts down and then get the retaining pin as well as the clips on and show you what the final product looks like. So here is the final product or results of the rotor change and the pad. As I mentioned to you guys, what I did was I put the pads in. First you have to retract the pistons. And this clip here, because it is under tension, you've got to get that retaining pin through. What I did was I pushed down on this retaining, or I'm sorry, this clip here with the screwdriver so that the retaining pin can go through a little easier. So we did that there. We mounted all of the sensors, connected everything in the very back, torqued the caliper bolts to 63, and this is essentially done. So what we'll go ahead and do is we will move over to the other side, finish that, and then we'll step over to the very front brakes. Here we have the front braking caliper setup assembly here. And the removal process is going to be very similar to the back. You have your cotter pin here that you have to remove. You have the retaining pin to the pad bracket that you also have to remove. The two 10mm Allens that you have to remove. The only difference is going to be on the brake lines. Again, the brake lines are going to be 10mm bolts that you remove. That's going to be on the inside, so that way remove those. You'll take this whole assembly off and slide the brake connectors back here off. So I won't film how to remove this because it essentially is very comparable to how the back is. The installation is going to be a little different because we are putting on a 350mm rotor. There's going to be a couple brackets that I will show you that actually push this caliper out a little bit. We'll get to that point and I'll show you guys. So here we have the caliper off the front, and the difference is we are running again that 350mm rotor in the front with specific special brackets right here. Now this bracket, it's going to go here, and it pushes the caliper out a little further from the center of the hub. You will also need longer bolts. Now, I want to thank the pioneers that actually figured how to retrofit the 350 in here. This I bought off of eBay, or you could actually buy it from a local member on Renlist, but all it is, it's just an extended stud. It has an aluminum bracket here, again, that will go here, and it just pushes the caliper away from the hub. So we'll go ahead and install that, and I'll show you guys what it looks like. So here is the final results that you guys can see. Nice clean 350 millimeter rotor. I did want to point out a couple of very important things. Inside this caliper, there is going to be a shimmy that you want to reuse, or you can buy a new one that actually sits inside the piston, so you don't want to mar it up or bend it or anything of the sort like that. You can reuse it. The other thing is, as you can see here, this says left, the other one is going to be a right. It is very important that you have the right rotor on the right side, because these are vented and you don't want it backwards, so very crucial to do. But aside from that, relatively straightforward process. Other things that I can kind of pinpoint out to you is, because this rotor, or I'm sorry, this caliper is now pushed out, I believe it's between 10 and 12 millimeters further this way, it's going to put just a little more pressure on the steel line to the caliper. So just be mindful when you're trying to position it. It'll fit without any issues, but again, just be cautious. The last thing that we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and put the wheels on, and we're going to go ahead and bed the pads in. Make sure that there's no type of vibrations or anything crazy that's associated with a brake job. So I'll do that and I'll report back to you guys. So we are finally finished with the pad change as well as the rotor change and upgrade on the 911. First, let's go ahead and just talk about the pad change. I cannot thank Porsche enough to design the caliper to be like a big brake kit where you are pulling the pads from the very top. Very easy to do. I had made the rookie mistake with this setup where I had pulled up my brake lever and essentially locked the pads into the caliper in the back. So make sure you guys don't do that. That way the pad would come out a lot easier. So big kudos for Porsche for doing that. It literally will take you 15 minutes to change out either axle, front or rear. So super easy to do. The one thing that you want to be careful of is obviously the wear sensors when you remove them. Make sure that you're cautious so that you do not break those. As far as the rotor change in itself, that was pretty easy altogether. Again, just two very big bolts to remove, and you have to set the caliper on some type of platform so it's not hanging, and make sure that you have a device that can properly push back the brake pistons so that way you can get the pads in. Also, make sure that you are double checking the level of your brake fluid, because when you are pushing those pistons out, your brake fluid is going to rise, so you don't want it to spill out of your brake reservoir. So just be careful with that. Again, either project that you're going to do, very easy to do. Make sure that you're able to torque things down the way that should be. Go ahead and put everything together, and then the final step, I believe, is the most crucial, is bedding in your pads. You have to do that, so that way the surface of your brake pads will essentially mesh as best as they can with your rotor surface. The technique that I used was I essentially drove around for 10 minutes, kept the rotors nice and warm at that point, and then I went ahead and did 0 to I went and did 30 to 0 stops at about 60 to 70% force without stopping. So you go 30, you stop, and then you kind of do a rolling. You go back up to 30 and do that about 5 to 6 times. And then once you're finished with that, you want to go ahead and go from either 50 to 60 down to 0 between 5 and 6 times. So drive up to 60, hammer the brakes without going into ABS mode, and then stop the vehicle, let off, do that again 4 to 6 times, and kind of go through that process. Now you know that you did it right when you can start smelling your brakes, and that means that it has burned off that initial layer of the pads as well as the rotors. So make sure that you bed those pads in. Now if my technique is incorrect, by all means please go ahead and post up what you guys do, but that's kind of a technique that I have used for many years. My pads have always worked very well. They've never squeaked. They have braked even. So definitely try to do that. To finalize, guys, overall, again, this project was quite easy to do. I really believe you can do this with not a bunch of specialized tools. So go ahead and tackle it. If you have any questions, feel free to post below. This is going to be Peter, your automotive fanatic, signing off until the next time, my friends.